The heavy bag swung back and forth as another punch landed with a dull thud. The gym smelled like sweat and rubber mats, a scent that had become familiar to anyone who trained there regularly. It was just after 6 in the evening, and the place was starting to fill up with people coming straight from work, still wearing their office stress on their faces. Derek wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and looked around the gym with the kind of confidence that came from being there longer than most. He'd been training at Iron Will Martial Arts for almost 3 years now, and in that time he'd made sure everyone knew his name. Not because he was the best fighter, but because he was the loudest, the kind of guy who always had something to say, always ready to give advice nobody asked for. His buddies were scattered around the gym. Tommy was working the speed bag near the window, and Jake was doing some half-hearted stretches by the water fountain. They looked up when Derek whistled and nodded toward the entrance. A woman had just walked in, and she was clearly new. She carried a gym bag over her shoulder and looked around like she was getting her bearings. She was black, probably in her late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore simple workout clothes, nothing fancy, and moved with a quiet kind of purpose as she headed toward the changing rooms. Derek grinned and walked over to his friends. "Fresh meat," he said, loud enough that a few other people glanced over. Tommy shook his head slightly, like he'd seen this before, but didn't say anything. Jake just shrugged and went back to his stretches. The thing about Derek was that he had a pattern. Whenever someone new joined the gym, especially women, he made it his personal mission to test them. He called it helping them understand what real training looked like. Everyone else called it being a jerk, but nobody really confronted him about it. The coaches had talked to him before, sure, but Derek always played it off like he was just being enthusiastic, just pushing people to be better. The woman came back out a few minutes later, and Derek watched as she found a spot in the corner to start warming up. She dropped her bag against the wall and began stretching, moving through each position with careful attention. There was something practiced about the way she moved, methodical and focused, but Derek wasn't paying attention to that. He was already planning his approach. Coach Miller was setting up the ring in the center of the gym. He was an older guy, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that told you he'd seen his share of fights. He'd been running this gym for over 20 years, and he took pride in creating a space where people could learn discipline and respect. But even good coaches sometimes miss things happening right under their noses. "All right, everyone," Coach Miller called out, his voice cutting through the noise of bags being hit and ropes being jumped. "We're doing partner drills today. Light sparring for those who want it. Technique work for everyone else. Find a partner and let's get moving." This was Derek's moment. He made sure to move quickly, weaving between other people pairing up, heading straight for the corner where the new woman was now rolling her shoulders, getting loose. Up close, he could see she was fit, athletic in a way that suggested she worked out regularly. But that didn't mean anything to Derek. He'd been in this gym longer. He knew the game. "Hey there," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "First day, right? I'm Derek, been training here forever. How about we partner up? I can show you the ropes, make sure you don't get hurt." The woman looked at him for a moment, her expression neutral. "I'm Maya," she said simply. "And sure, we can partner up." Derek smiled wider. "Great, great. So you done any martial arts before? Or is this like your first time trying something like this?" Maya began wrapping her hands with practiced efficiency. "I've trained before," she said, not offering any more details than that. "Oh yeah? Like YouTube videos, or did you take a class somewhere?" Derek asked, his tone making it clear he didn't expect much. "Something like that," Maya replied, finishing with one hand and starting on the other. By now, Tommy and Jake had found partners and were working through some basic combinations on the mats. A few other regulars had noticed Derek talking to the new woman, and there were some exchanges of knowing looks. They'd seen this movie before. Derek would get paired with someone new, go way too hard, make them uncomfortable, and then act surprised when they didn't come back to the gym. Lisa, a woman who'd been training at the gym for about a year, caught Maya's eye from across the room and gave her a look that seemed to say, "Be careful." But Maya just gave a small nod and continued wrapping her hands. Coach Miller was calling people to different areas. Those sparring, get your gear on and get in the ring. Those doing technique work, spread out on the mats. "Let's go, people. Time is money and you're paying for my time." Derek grabbed his gloves and headgear. "Come on, let's get in the ring. Best way to learn is to just do it, you know? I'll take it easy on you, don't worry." Maya picked up her own gloves from her bag. They were worn in, The kind that had seen real use, not the brand new shiny ones that beginners usually showed up with. Derek didn't notice. He was too busy talking. So the key thing is to keep your hands up, he was saying as they climbed through the ropes. A lot of beginners forget that and end up getting popped in the face. Not fun, trust me. And footwork, that's huge. You want to stay light on your feet like this. He demonstrated by bouncing around, throwing in some exaggerated movements that were more show than substance. Maya stepped into the ring behind him and began adjusting her gloves. She tested her stance, shifted her weight from foot to foot, rolled her neck once to each side. Everything about her movements was economical, nothing wasted. Around the ring, people were starting to watch. Word had gotten around fast that Derek had partnered with the new woman, and everyone knew what that meant. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious to see how this would play out. Lisa had stopped her own drilling and was watching with her arms crossed. Coach Miller approached the ring with a timer. All right, 3-minute rounds, 1-minute rest. This is light sparring, people. Light. Technical work. If I see anyone going too hard, you're done for the day. Got it? Got it, Coach, Derek said cheerfully. Under his breath, just loud enough for Maya to hear, he added, Light is relative, though, right? Gotta make it realistic. Maya said nothing. She just raised her gloves into position, her stance solid, her eyes focused. There was something about the way she stood there that should have been a warning sign. The balance was too good, the positioning too precise. But Derek was too busy enjoying his moment to notice any of that. Coach Miller looked at both of them. Touch gloves. Keep it clean. They brought their gloves together in the traditional sign of respect, though Derek's tap was dismissive, barely making contact. Maya's tap was firm but neutral, and time, Coach Miller said, starting his timer. Derek immediately began circling, his movements big and theatrical. Here we go, he announced to nobody in particular. Let's see what you got. The other people in the gym had stopped what they were doing. Even those who weren't watching directly had one eye on the ring. There was something about the energy in the air, a tension that everyone could feel. Tommy put down his water bottle and moved closer. Jake stopped his shadowboxing. Even the people hitting the heavy bags seemed to time their punches differently, creating pockets of quiet so they could hear what was happening in the ring. Derek threw a few air punches, still bouncing around with that exaggerated movement. Okay, so we'll start slow, just get a feel for each other's rhythm. Then we can pick it up a little. Sound good? Maya nodded once, her gloves still held in perfect position. Her eyes tracked Derek's movements with an intensity that suggested she was processing every detail, cataloging every habit, every tell. You seem pretty calm for your first day, Derek said, trying to get a reaction. Most people are nervous getting in the ring. It's natural. Nothing to be ashamed of. Still, Maya said nothing. She just waited, patient and ready. Derek's smile faltered just a little. He was used to people engaging with his banter, either nervously laughing or trying to match his energy. The silence was unexpected. It made him feel like he needed to fill the space even more. All right then, he said, his voice getting a little harder. Let's dance. He took a step forward and the real story was about to begin. Everything up until this moment had just been set up, the pieces moving into position. Derek thought he was the one in control, thought he knew exactly how this would go. He'd done it before, after all. Dozens of times. New person shows up, he tests them. They realize the gym is more serious than they thought, and either they toughen up or they disappear. Simple. But as he looked across the ring at Maya, something flickered in the back of his mind. Just a tiny whisper of doubt. The way she stood there, completely unfazed by his size, his reputation, his presence. The way those worn gloves fit her hands like they were part of her. The way every single person in the gym had stopped to watch and how some of them looked worried, but not for who Derek expected. He pushed the thought away. He'd been doing this too long to second-guess himself now. Besides, everyone was watching. He had an image to maintain. Coach Miller stood outside the ring, his hand on the timer, his eyes moving between both fighters. He'd been doing this long enough to recognize the signs of trouble, but he also believed in letting people learn their own lessons sometimes. As long as nobody got seriously hurt, a little humbling could be good for the soul, especially for someone like Derek who'd been needing it for a while. The clock was ticking. 3 minutes on the timer. 180 seconds that would change everything Derek thought he knew about fighting, about respect and about the danger of making assumptions. Maya adjusted her stance one final time, A tiny movement that put her weight in perfect balance. Her breathing was calm and controlled. Whatever was about to happen, she was ready for it. Derek was still talking, still filling the air with words, still convinced he was the one writing this story. He had no idea that Maya had already read ahead, that she knew exactly how this was going to end. The fight was about to begin, and Derek had no idea what he was walking into. Derek moved first like he always did. He threw a lazy jab toward Maya's face, not really trying to land it, just testing the waters. It was the kind of punch designed to make someone flinch, to see how they'd react under pressure. Most beginners would either freeze up or panic and throw something wild back. Maya didn't do either. Her head slipped to the side, just enough to let the punch sail past her ear. The movement was minimal, efficient. No wasted energy, no unnecessary drama. Derek's eyebrows went up slightly, but he kept his cocky smile plastered on. "Not bad," he said, bouncing on his toes. "You've got some reflexes. Let's see how you handle combinations." He threw a 1-2 jab cross, putting a little more behind it this time. Still not full power, but enough to let her know he was serious. The punches cut through the air with sharp, snapping sounds. Maya slipped the jab again, then raised her right glove to block the cross. The impact made a satisfying thud against her guard, but her arm didn't budge. She absorbed it perfectly, her stance solid as concrete. Then something happened that Derek wasn't expecting. Maya stepped forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat, and threw her own combination. Left hook to the body, right straight to the head, left hook again. The punches came so fast they were almost a blur. Derek's eyes went wide. He managed to block the first one, barely, but the second one grazed his headgear, snapping his head to the side. The third one he didn't see coming at all. It slammed into his ribs with a meaty thunk that echoed through the gym. "Oof," someone in the crowd muttered. Derek backed up a step, his smile faltering. That body shot had hurt. Not enough to take him down, but enough to make him realize this wasn't going to be the easy session he'd planned. He could feel the spot on his ribs already starting to ache. "Lucky shot," he said, trying to laugh it off. But his voice had changed. There was an edge to it now, a hardness that hadn't been there before. The playful predator was gone. Now he just looked annoyed. Tommy, watching from outside the ring, leaned over to Jake. "Did you see how fast that was?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, that wasn't beginner speed." Coach Miller stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was watching Maya now, really watching her. The way she moved, the way she positioned her feet, the way her hands returned to guard position after every exchange. This wasn't someone learning the basics. This was someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Derek came forward again, but this time there was no swagger. He was actually trying now. He threw a hard right hand, putting real power behind it, aiming for Maya's head. The kind of punch that was definitely not light sparring anymore. Maya ducked under it smoothly, and as Derek's momentum carried him forward, she pivoted and landed another body shot. Then another. Both of them dug into the same spot on his ribs, and Derek let out an involuntary grunt. He tried to clinch, to grab onto her and slow things down, but Maya pushed him off and circled away. She wasn't letting him rest, wasn't letting him catch his breath or reset. "Come on, Derek," she said quietly. The first word she'd spoken since the round started. "I thought you were going to show me how it's done." That got under his skin. Derek's face flushed red, and he could hear a few snickers from the people watching. His buddies weren't laughing, but they weren't jumping to his defense either. They just looked uncomfortable. He charged forward, throwing a flurry of punches. Hooks, uppercuts, crosses, everything he had. He was going way harder than he should have been for light sparring. Coach Miller took a step closer to the ring, ready to call it off if things got out of hand. But Maya handled it. Every punch Derek threw, she either blocked, parried, or slipped. Her defense was airtight, and between his attacks she'd counter with surgical precision. A jab to his face that made his head snap back. A leg kick that made him stumble. Another body shot that had him wincing. The gym had gone completely silent except for the sounds of the fight. The thud of gloves on flesh. The squeak of shoes on canvas. Derek's increasingly heavy breathing. Lisa, the woman who'd given Maya that warning look earlier, had her hand over her mouth. She'd wanted Derek to get checked for a long time, but seeing it actually happen was something else. It was like watching someone's worldview crumble in real time. Derek was getting sloppy now. His punches were wider, easier to see coming. He was breathing hard through his mouth, sucking air in desperate gulps. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. That cocky confidence from 5 minutes ago had completely evaporated. Maya, meanwhile, looked like she'd barely started warming up. Her breathing was still controlled. Her movements were still crisp. If anything, she seemed to be getting more comfortable, more relaxed. She landed a beautiful straight right that caught Derek clean on the nose. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make his eyes water and his vision blur for a second. He felt something warm and wet, and when he wiped his glove across his face, he saw the red smear. His nose was bleeding. "Time," Coach Miller called out, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's the round. Take a minute." Derek practically stumbled to his corner, yanking off his headgear. His face was beet red, partly from exertion and partly from embarrassment. His nose was definitely bleeding, not gushing, but a steady trickle that he had to keep wiping away. Maya walked calmly to her corner, barely even breathing hard. She took a small sip of water and looked around the gym with mild interest, like she was noticing the equipment for the first time. Tommy grabbed a towel and went over to Derek. "Dude," he said quietly, "maybe you should call it. That's clearly not a beginner." "I'm fine," Derek snapped, snatching the towel and pressing it to his nose. "Just got caught. It happens." "Derek, she's making you look like—" "I said I'm fine." Derek's voice was sharp enough that Tommy backed off, raising his hands in surrender. Jake shook his head from where he stood. He'd seen Derek be stubborn before, but this was something else. The smart thing would be to tap out, admit he'd underestimated her, and move on. But Derek's ego wouldn't let him. He'd talked too much trash. Too many people were watching. Across the ring, Coach Miller had walked over to Maya's corner. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Fine, Coach," Maya said. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. Maya smiled slightly. "Once or twice." Coach Miller studied her for a moment. "How long have you been training?" "Since I was 12. My dad owned a gym in Detroit. Competed amateur for about 10 years. Won a few regional titles." The coach let out a long breath. "And you didn't think to mention this before getting in the ring with my most obnoxious member?" "He didn't ask," Maya said simply. "He just assumed." Coach Miller almost laughed, but he kept it professional. "Well, try not to hurt him too bad. He's got a fragile ego, and I don't want him crying in my office later." "Yes, Coach." The minute was almost up. Derek was back on his feet, having stuffed some tissue up his nose to stop the bleeding. He looked angry now, really angry. The embarrassment had transformed into something uglier. He wasn't thinking about teaching a lesson anymore. He was thinking about revenge, about reasserting dominance, about making sure everyone knew this was just a fluke. 30 seconds, Coach Miller announced to the gym. People were gathering closer to the ring now. Word had spread through the gym like wildfire. Even people who'd been in the back doing their own workouts had come out to watch. Everyone wanted to see what would happen in round 2. Derek rolled his shoulders and put his headgear back on, yanking it tight. His jaw was clenched so hard the muscles stood out on the sides of his face. He looked across the ring at Maya with pure determination. Maya just looked back calmly, her expression unchanged. If she felt any satisfaction at what was happening, she didn't show it. She just looked ready for whatever came next. "All right," Coach Miller said, looking between both fighters. He seemed to be considering stopping the whole thing, but something made him decide to let it play out. "Round 2. Keep it under control, Derek, I mean it." Derek didn't respond. He just stared at Maya. "Touch gloves," Coach Miller said. This time Derek didn't even pretend. He just raised his gloves slightly and waited for the signal to start. Maya touched her gloves together in front of her own face. A small gesture of respect that Derek didn't deserve and didn't return. And time. The second round was about to begin, and everyone in that gym knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. Derek came out swinging like a man possessed. No more testing. No more playing around. He threw everything he had at Maya, and this time he wasn't holding anything back. These weren't light sparring punches anymore. These were the kind of punches you threw when you wanted to hurt someone. The first combination came in fast and angry. Hook, cross hook, uppercut. Real power behind every shot. The kind of aggression that would overwhelm most people in that gym. The sound of his gloves cutting through the air was sharp and violent, but Maya wasn't most people. She moved like she'd seen it all before. Like Derek's anger was something she could read as easily as a book. She slipped the first hook by inches. blocked the cross with her forearm, ducked under the second hook so smoothly it looked choreographed. The uppercut missed completely, leaving Derek off balance, and that's when Maya made him pay. She stepped in close and threw a perfect left hook to his body. The punch landed right below his ribs with a sound that made everyone watching wince. Derek's whole body folded slightly, his breath coming out in a sharp gasp. Before he could recover, Maya pivoted and threw a right hand that caught him on the side of his headgear. His head whipped to the side and he stumbled backward, his legs looking shaky for the first time. "Stay on him," someone in the crowd muttered, though it wasn't clear if they were rooting for Maya or just caught up in the moment. Derek's face was twisted in frustration and pain. His ribs were screaming at him. That same spot Maya kept targeting felt like it was on fire. Every breath hurt. But stopping wasn't an option. Not with everyone watching. Not after all the trash he'd talked. He tried to clinch again, grabbing for Maya to tie her up and give himself a moment to breathe. But she was too quick. She pushed him off with a sharp shove and immediately went back to work. A stiff jab snapped his head back. Another body shot made him grunt. A leg kick to his lead leg made him adjust his stance. "Come on, Derek," Tommy called from outside the ring, though his voice lacked conviction. He looked more worried than encouraging. Derek threw a wild overhand right, putting everything into it. If it landed, it might change the whole fight. But it didn't land. Maya saw it coming from a mile away. She leaned back just enough for his fist to pass in front of her face, and then she countered with a beautiful straight, right down the middle. The punch caught Derek square on the nose again. The tissue he'd stuffed up there to stop the bleeding earlier came flying out, and fresh blood started flowing. His eyes watered instantly. For a second, everything went blurry. Maya didn't give him time to recover. She threw a combination that was pure technical perfection. Jab to set up the distance. Right hand to the body. Left hook upstairs. Another right hand. Derek tried to cover up, bringing his gloves up to protect his face, but that just left his body exposed. Maya switched targets immediately, driving 2 more shots into his ribs. The same spot. Over and over. It was systematic, calculated. She wasn't fighting angry or trying to prove anything. She was just fighting smart, breaking him down piece by piece. Derek's guard started to drop. His arms felt heavy, like they were made of lead. His shoulders burned. His legs felt wobbly. He'd been in the gym for 3 years, sure, but he'd never been in a real fight like this. Never faced someone who was actually better than him, who knew exactly what they were doing. "Maybe that's enough," Coach Miller said, taking a step toward the ring. He'd seen enough. This had stopped being sparring and started being a lesson, and the lesson was clearly being learned. But before he could stop it, Derek made one last, desperate attempt. He dropped his hands and charged forward like a bull, trying to tackle Maya, to get her on the ground where maybe he could use his size advantage. It was sloppy and obvious and born of pure desperation. Maya saw it coming. She sidestepped at the last possible second, and Derek went stumbling past her, nearly falling through the ropes. The crowd gasped. He caught himself at the last second, grabbing the top rope to keep from tumbling out of the ring entirely. When he turned around, Maya was right there. She'd followed him, staying on him like a shadow. She threw a spinning back fist that connected with his headgear with a sharp crack. Derek's legs buckled. He didn't go down, but he definitely wanted to. The gym was absolutely silent now, except for Derek's heavy breathing. It was the kind of silence that felt thick, heavy with anticipation and shock. People couldn't believe what they were watching. Some of them had never liked Derek, had quietly resented the way he treated newcomers, but seeing him get completely dismantled like this was something else entirely. Lisa had both hands over her mouth. Her eyes were wide. Part of her felt satisfaction, but another part felt something almost like pity. Almost. Derek tried to throw another punch, but it was slow and telegraphed. Maya blocked it easily and countered with a left hook that snapped his head to the side. Then she threw a right hand that hit the same spot. Derek's mouthguard flew out, bouncing on the canvas with a wet plop. His legs were rubber now. He could barely keep his hands up. His nose was bleeding freely, blood running down his chin and dripping onto his chest. His left eye was starting to swell. Every part of his body hurt. Maya stood in front of him, her gloves still up, still ready. She wasn't even breathing that hard. There was no malice in her eyes, no satisfaction or cruelty, just calm focus. She was waiting to see what he'd do next. Derek tried to say something, but it came out as just a mumble. He was done. Completely done. His body knew it even if his pride was still trying to fight. "That's it," Coach Miller said firmly, climbing into the ring. "We're done here." But Derek shook his head weakly. "No," he managed to say. "I can keep going." "Derek, it's over," the coach said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "I said I can keep going." Derek's voice cracked. He tried to push past Coach Miller to get back to Maya, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He took one step and nearly fell. The coach had to catch him. "Son, the only place you're going is to the bench," Coach Miller said, his voice gentle but firm. Derek looked around at all the faces watching him. His buddies. The regulars. The newcomers. Everyone had seen everything. Seen him get dominated. Seen him get desperate. Seen him refuse to quit even when he should have. And then he looked at Maya. She was standing there calmly, waiting. Not celebrating. Not gloating. Just standing there like this was a normal Tuesday for her, which given her background it probably was. Something broke inside Derek in that moment. Not physically, but something else. Maybe it was his ego. Maybe it was the character he'd been playing for the past 3 years. Whatever it was, it shattered like glass. His hands started to shake. Then his whole body. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Blood dripped onto the canvas beneath him. Small red droplets that spread on the white surface. "Please," he said quietly, so quietly that only Coach Miller and Maya could hear him. "Please, just no more." It wasn't the begging that the gym would talk about later, but it was close enough. It was surrender. Complete and total. Coach Miller looked at Maya and gave her a small nod. She nodded back and lowered her gloves, stepping away to give Derek space. "All right, everybody, back to your workouts," Coach Miller announced to the crowd. "Show's over." People started to disperse slowly, reluctantly. There was a buzz of conversation, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. Tommy and Jake hesitated, not sure if they should help their friend or keep their distance. Derek slowly straightened up, wiping blood from his face with the back of his glove. He looked at Maya one more time. She was already taking off her gloves, her expression neutral. "You okay?" she asked him. Not mocking, not triumphant. Just genuinely asking. Derek wanted to say something. Wanted to apologize or explain or make an excuse, but all he could do was nod slightly before turning and climbing out of the ring. His whole body felt like one giant bruise. As he walked toward the locker room, the gym seemed different somehow. Bigger, less familiar. Or maybe he was just different, smaller. More aware of how much he didn't know. Behind him he could hear Coach Miller talking to Maya in a low voice. He couldn't make out the words, but he could guess what was being said. Probably something about going easy on the regulars. Probably something about how she was welcome any time. Derek pushed open the locker room door and disappeared inside, leaving behind the worst 3 rounds of his life. The gym would talk about what happened today for months. Some would say he got what he deserved. Others would say it was brutal to watch. But everyone would agree on one thing. Derek had learned a lesson he'd never forget. The locker room was quiet except for the sound of running water. Derek sat on the wooden bench with his head tilted back, a wet towel pressed against his face. His nose had finally stopped bleeding, but his whole face felt swollen and tender. Every breath still hurt where Maya had hammered his ribs over and over. He could hear the muffled sounds of the gym through the walls. People getting back to their workouts. The rhythmic thud of gloves hitting bags. Normal training sounds. Like nothing had happened. Like his entire world hadn't just been turned upside down. The door opened and Tommy walked in, moving slowly like he wasn't sure if he should be there. He grabbed a water bottle from his bag and sat down on the bench across from Derek. Not saying anything at first, that was rough. "Man," Tommy finally said. Derek pulled the towel away from his face and looked at his friend. "You think?" "I'm just saying maybe you should have what?" Derek interrupted, his voice sharp. "Should have tapped out? Should have admitted I couldn't handle it? In front of everyone?" Tommy held up his hands. "I'm not trying to start anything. I'm just saying she clearly knew what she was doing. There's no shame in recognizing that." Derek let out a bitter laugh that turned into a wince. Even laughing hurt. "Easy for you to say. You weren't the one in there getting embarrassed." "You embarrassed yourself before you even threw a punch," Tommy said quietly. "The way you talked to her. The way you always talk to new people, like they're beneath you." Derek wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. He looked down at his hands. His knuckles were red and swollen. All that punching and he'd barely landed anything clean. "How long have you felt like that?" Derek asked. Tommy shrugged. "A while. But you don't really listen when people try to tell you stuff. You just do your thing." The door opened again and Jake walked in, followed by Coach Miller. The coach had his arms crossed and the expression on his face made it clear this wasn't a social visit. "How you feeling?" Coach Miller asked Derek. "Like I got hit by a truck." "Good. Maybe that'll help you remember this." Conversation. The coach sat down on the bench next to Derek. "We need to talk about your behavior in this gym." Derek stared at the floor. "I know, I messed up. Messing up is forgetting to wrap your hands. What you did out there was something else entirely. You went into that ring planning to humiliate someone you didn't know anything about, and when she turned out to be better than you got angry and tried to hurt her. I wasn't trying to." "Yes, you were," Coach Miller cut him off. "I've been coaching for 25 years. I know what I'm looking at. You dropped any pretense of sparring and started throwing like it was a street fight." Derek couldn't argue with that. It was true. "Do you know who that woman is?" The coach continued. "Her name is Maya Rodriguez. She fought amateur for 10 years. Won the regional Golden Gloves 3 times. Her father was Roberto Rodriguez. Ran one of the best gyms in Detroit before he passed away. She's forgotten more about fighting than you'll ever know." The words hit Derek like another punch to the gut. Golden Gloves. 3 times. And he treated her like she didn't belong there. "Why didn't she say anything?" Derek asked quietly. "Why should she have to?" Coach Miller replied. "Why do you assume everyone needs to prove themselves to you? This is a gym, not your personal kingdom." Jake spoke up from where he was standing by the lockers. "Coach, to be fair, Derek's not the only one who acts like that sometimes." "Maybe not," Coach Miller agreed. "But he's the worst offender, and today everyone saw what happens when that attitude meets reality. So he's the one I'm talking to right now." Derek felt his face flush with shame. It was one thing to lose a fight. It was another thing entirely to have your character examined and found wanting. "I've had complaints about you before," the coach said. "People saying you go too hard with beginners. Women saying you make them uncomfortable. I've talked to you about it and you always promise to do better, but nothing changes. Today was supposed to be your wake-up call." "It was," Derek said quickly. "I get it now." "I really do." Coach Miller studied him for a long moment. "We'll see. You're suspended from sparring for 2 weeks. During that time, you're going to work fundamentals only. Bags, mitts, footwork drills. No partner work. And you're going to think real hard about whether you want to be the kind of person who lifts others up or tears them down." Derek nodded. There was no point arguing. He deserved worse. "And you're going to apologize to Maya," the coach added. Derek's head snapped up. "Right now?" "Yes, right now. She's still out there cooling down. Go talk to her like an adult." The thought of facing her again made Derek's stomach twist, but he stood up slowly, every muscle protesting. Tommy and Jake watched him go, neither one offering to come along. This was something he had to do alone. When Derek walked back into the gym, people glanced his way and then quickly looked away. The whole vibe had changed. Before, people had treated him like he owned the place. Now they looked at him like he was just another guy who'd gotten humbled. Maya was by the water fountain, her gym bag already packed. She was talking to Lisa, both of them looking relaxed. When she saw Derek approaching, she said something to Lisa, who nodded and walked away. Derek stopped a few feet from Maya, suddenly unsure how to start. His face was a mess. His pride was in shambles. And here was this woman who'd just taken him apart, looking completely unbothered. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, his voice rough. Maya took a sip of water and nodded. "Sure, I want to apologize," Derek said. "For how I acted. For the things I said. For assuming you didn't know what you were doing. That was wrong." Maya watched him carefully, her expression giving nothing away. "Okay. I've been training here for 3 years and I thought that meant something. Like I'd earned the right to test people or whatever. But really I was just being a jerk." "Yeah, you were," Maya agreed, and there was no sugarcoating it. Just honest truth. Derek felt his face get hot again, but he pushed through. "I know sorry doesn't fix it. But I am sorry. You came here to work out and I turned it into something else." Maya was quiet for a moment, like she was deciding how much energy she wanted to spend on this conversation. Finally, she spoke. "You know what the sad part is? I've dealt with guys like you at every gym I've ever been to. Guys who see a woman and immediately assume she doesn't belong. who feel like they need to put her in her place. I'm not usually— Let me finish, Maya said, and Derek closed his mouth. The difference is, most of those guys learn after the first time. They realize their assumptions were wrong and they adjust. But some guys, they just get angrier. They make it personal. Which one are you going to be? Derek thought about that. Really thought about it. The first one, he said finally. I want to be the first one. Good, because this gym seems nice. Coach Miller clearly cares about what he's built. It would be a shame if one person's ego ruined it for everyone else. It won't, Derek promised. I'll do better. Maya picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. We'll see. Actions matter more than words. She started to walk past him toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, you've got decent power in your right hand. If you worked on your footwork and stopped telegraphing everything, you could probably be pretty good. Derek blinked in surprise. After everything, she was giving him advice? Thanks, he managed to say. Maya nodded once and headed for the door. Derek watched her go, feeling like he'd just been given something he didn't deserve. A second chance. A path forward. Around him, the gym continued its rhythm. People training. People sweating. People working to be better versions of themselves. For the first time in 3 years, Derek felt like maybe he could be one of them. Not the guy everyone was scared of or annoyed by. Just someone trying to improve. He walked over to the heavy bag and started wrapping his hands. His ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He had a lot of work to do, and not just on his fighting. 3 weeks had passed since the incident, and the gym felt different to Derek. Or maybe he was the one who felt different. Either way, things had changed. He'd kept his head down during his 2-week suspension from sparring. Showed up every day and worked the basics like Coach Miller told him to. Jabs on the heavy bag until his shoulders burned. Footwork drills until his calves cramped. Mid-work with the coach, focusing on technique instead of power. It was humbling, starting over like a beginner, but that was kind of the point. The other gym members had kept their distance at first. Nobody was outright hostile, but nobody was friendly either. Derek couldn't blame them. He'd spent 3 years being the guy everyone tolerated, but nobody really liked. Changing that reputation wasn't going to happen overnight. Maya had become a regular at the gym. She came in 3 times a week, usually in the early evening. She worked mostly by herself, occasionally partnering with Lisa or some of the other experienced fighters. People respected her. Not because she'd beaten Derek, but because of how she carried herself. Calm, focused, never talking trash or making anyone feel small. Derek tried not to stare when she was training, but sometimes he couldn't help watching. The way she moved was like poetry. Every punch had purpose. Every step had meaning. She made it look effortless, which Derek now understood meant she'd put in thousands of hours to make it that way. On this particular Tuesday, Derek was working the speed bag when Coach Miller walked over. Your suspension's up, the coach said. You can start partner drills again if you want. Derek stopped punching and turned to face him. Yeah, but I'm watching you. One complaint, one incident of you going too hard or acting like a fool, and you're done here. Permanently. Understood, Coach. Coach Miller studied him for a moment. You've been putting in good work these past few weeks. Keep it up. It was a small compliment, but it meant more to Derek than he expected. He nodded and went back to the speed bag, but his mind was already racing. Partner drills meant sparring eventually. The thought made his stomach tight with anxiety. Not because he was scared of getting hit again, but because he was scared of falling back into old patterns. That evening, as people were pairing up for partner work, Derek found himself standing alone. Tommy and Jake had already partnered together. Lisa was working with another woman. Everyone seemed to have their person. Need a partner? Derek turned around. Maya was standing there, her gloves already on, her expression neutral. Derek wasn't sure what to say. You want to work with me? Coach says you're off suspension. Figured you could use someone to drill with. She said it matter-of-factly like it was no big deal. Are you sure? After what happened? That was 3 weeks ago, Maya interrupted. You apologized. You've been working hard. I'm willing to give you a chance to show you meant it. Derek felt something catch in his throat. He didn't deserve her generosity, but he wasn't going to waste it. Okay, he said. Thank you. They found a spot on the mats and started with basic combinations. Jab, cross, hook. Simple stuff. Maya called out the numbers and Derek threw the punches against her mitts. She corrected his form when he dropped his right hand. reminded him to pivot his hips, told him to keep his chin down. It was strange being coached by someone who dismantled him so completely. But Maya wasn't rubbing it in. She was just teaching, the same way she probably taught people at her dad's gym back in Detroit. After 20 minutes, they switched. Derek held the mitts while Maya worked. Watching her up close like this, seeing the technique in slow motion was incredible. Every movement was precise, efficient, no wasted energy. "You're really good at this," Derek said during a water break. Maya smiled slightly. "I've had good teachers. My dad started training me when I was 12. Said if I was going to be in a gym, I needed to know how to protect myself." "Is that why you started? For self-defense?" "At first. But then I fell in love with it. The discipline, the challenge, the way it makes you face yourself, you know? You can't lie in the ring. You either put in the work or you don't." Derek thought about that. He'd been lying to himself for 3 years, thinking he was good because he could bully people who didn't know any better. The ring had definitely made him face that truth. "Can I ask you something?" Derek said, "Sure. Why are you being nice to me? After everything?" Maya took a sip of water and considered the question. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be better. And because I've seen what happens when people don't get that chance. They either quit, which means the gym loses someone who might have become great, or they get worse, which makes the gym toxic for everyone." Which one was I headed toward? Honestly? The second one. You were making this place worse just by being in it. The words stung, but Derek knew they were true. "And now? Now you're trying." That's all anyone can ask. Over the next few weeks, Derek and Maya fell into a routine. Not friends exactly, but training partners. She pushed him to be better, and he listened. Actually listened instead of pretending he knew everything. The other gym members started to notice the change. Derek wasn't talking trash anymore. Wasn't volunteering to spar with beginners. When he did partner with someone less experienced, he was patient, helpful, the kind of training partner he should have been all along. One evening, a new guy joined the gym. Young, maybe 19, with the kind of cocky swagger Derek recognized because he'd worn it himself. The kid was making comments, acting like he had something to prove. Derek watched him for a while, feeling that old familiar urge rise up. The urge to put this kid in his place, to show him who was who. But then he caught Maya's eye from across the gym. She wasn't saying anything, just looking at him with that calm, steady gaze. Derek took a breath and walked over to the new kid. "Hey man, I'm Derek. Welcome to the gym." The kid looked him up and down. "Yeah, you any good?" Old Derek would have taken the bait. Would have suggested they spar right then and there. New Derek just smiled. "I'm working on it," he said. "You need someone to show you where stuff is?" The kid seemed thrown off by the friendly response. Sure, yeah." Derek spent the next 20 minutes giving the actual tour he should have given Maya that first day. Showed him the equipment. Introduced him to Coach Miller. Explained the gym rules. The kid's swagger faded a bit, replaced by genuine interest. "Thanks, man," the kid said when they were done. "That's cool of you." "No problem. We all start somewhere." Later, as Derek was wrapping up his workout, Maya came over. "That was good, what you did with the new guy." "Yeah, well, somebody recently taught me that everyone deserves a chance." Maya smiled. "Look at you learning and stuff." Derek laughed. It felt good to laugh in this gym again, without it being at someone else's expense. "Hey, Maya?" "Yeah, thank you. For not giving up on me. For giving me that chance," Maya shrugged. "Thank yourself. I just held the mitts. You did the work." As Derek left the gym that night, he passed the wall where they kept photos of gym achievements, competition wins, belt promotions, community events. He'd never been in any of those photos. Had never done anything worth putting on the wall. But maybe that could change. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. Wanted to contribute instead of just taking up space. The night air was cool and his body ached in that good way that comes from honest training. Derek's nose had healed wrong, leaving a small bump that would probably never go away. Every time he looked in the mirror, he'd see that reminder of the day Maya Rodriguez taught him the most important lesson of his life. Some lessons you learn from books. Some you learn from teachers. And some you learn from getting absolutely dominated by someone you underestimated. Derek was grateful for all three, but especially that last one. It had hurt like hell, both physically and emotionally, but it had also saved him from becoming someone he wouldn't have liked very much. As he walked to his car, He could already feel himself looking forward to tomorrow's training. There was so much he still had to learn, so much room to grow, and for the first time in 3 years he was excited about that instead of threatened by it. The gym would tell the story of Derek and Maya for years to come. But the best part of the story wasn't the fight itself. It was what happened after, when one person chose to be better and another person chose to help them get there. That was the real victory, and unlike a sparring match everyone won,